Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak. Your podcast available every morning on Apple, Spotify or wherever you listen. It's Monday, the 14th of October here in London. I'm Caroline Hepker. Coming up today, the missing Big Bang. China's weekend finance ministry briefing disappoints investors. Summit wrong. Britain's investor charm offensive begins under a cloud after DP World nearly pulled out. Plus, blasting off again, SpaceX manages to catch its booster rocket after launch, a major step towards fully reusable rockets. Let's start with a roundup of our top stories. China's highly watched investor briefing was smaller than had been expected, sending markets swinging. Officials promised more aid for the slumping property sector and indebted local governments, but they didn't give a headline spending figure. Investors and analysts surveyed by Bloomberg had expected the superpower to announce as much as $283 billion worth of stimulus measures. Union Bancaire Privé's senior Asia economist, Carlos Casanova, says that this wasn't the fiscal moment that markets were waiting for.
It is clear that they are just tackling some of the structural issues. They're not really looking to massively inject, so it does not constitute a whatever it takes moment, in my opinion.
Casanova adds that we should prepare for further market fluctuations this week as investors digest the news. That press briefing, of course, on Saturday. Goldman Sachs, though, has now upgraded its forecast for China's economic growth after Beijing unveiled the series of measures. They see GDP of 4.9% this year, up from 4.7% previously, and Goldman Sachs expects 4.7% Chinese GDP in 2025. Keir Starmer will vow to rip up red tape when he pitches his vision to executives at the International Investment Summit in London. The UK Prime Minister is expected to unveil deals in AI and life sciences, which reportedly may total more than £50 billion. But in a sign of the mixed relationship with business, comments from two cabinet ministers almost wrecked a £1 billion investment by the P&O Ferries parent company DP World. The former head of the CBI, Karen Billamoria, says that ministers must be careful.
We look at the first 100 days of this government, and it's not exactly been impressive. And it's very worrying with one incident after another. I thought with a huge majority, we would at last, after the instability of the last 8 years, have some stability.
That was Karen Billamoria, Lord Billamoria, speaking there. Many of the business leaders at the summit will be quizzing the government on the plans for the budget, which comes in just 2 weeks' time. Hezbollah says that it aimed to cause maximum destruction after a drone attack killed 4 Israeli soldiers at a military base. More than 60 others were hurt in the strike in central Israel, something the militant group says was in retaliation for escalating attacks on Lebanon. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is urging UN peacekeepers in Hezbollah-held territory to leave.
I'd like to appeal directly to the UN Secretary-General. It is time for you to remove UNIFIL from Hezbollah's strongholds. The IDF has repeatedly asked for this and has been met with repeated refusals, all aimed at providing a human shield to Hezbollah terrorists.
The UN has so far refused Netanyahu's requests, which some fear are the prelude to further ground invasions into Lebanon. Lebanon says that more than 2,000 people have been killed and hundreds of thousands displaced in recent weeks. Kamala Harris has questioned opponent Donald Trump's decision to shield his medical records after releasing her own. The current vice president suggested that his campaign has something to hide whilst addressing crowds at an event in North Carolina.
He refuses to release his medical records. I've done it. Every other presidential candidate in modern era has done it. It makes you wonder, why does his staff want him to hide away?
Democratic nominee Kamala Harris speaking there. Trump, who is 78, told CBS News in August he would very gladly release his medical records, but has declined media requests to do so. Following the publication of Harris's records, the former president's campaign spokesman said he has released health updates from his personal doctor and the former White House physician, now a Republican congressman, all showing he is in, quote, excellent health. TSMC is planning more plants in Europe with a focus on the market for AI chips. Taiwan's National Science and Technology Council Minister Wu Cheng-wen told Bloomberg News today that the firm has started construction in Dresden, but did not specify a timeline for further European expansion. TSMC produces most of its semiconductors in Taiwan, but is spending tens of billions of dollars to set up new sites in the US, Japan and Germany, partly to hedge against rising geopolitical tensions in China. Dresden will be the firm's first factory in Europe. About half of the funding for the project will be covered by state subsidies. And cracks are appearing in the Eurozone's labour market. The news comes as ECB policymakers are expected to reduce borrowing costs this week. Bloomberg's Tiwa Adebayo has the story.
After years of unexpected resilience, Europe's job market could be in for a sudden jolt. Major companies, including chemicals firm BASF and others, are already offloading staff, and some officials fear further deterioration could rattle a region on the brink of recession. It was just over 2 months ago that ECB President Christine Lagarde touted the strength of the bloc's job market, crediting it with buying the central bank time to gather new information when setting monetary policy. But now that time appears to have run out. Data points only to gentle cooling for now, but even a small contraction could lead to a noticeable drop in job vacancies. In London, Tiwa Adebayo, Bloomberg Radio.
And those are our top stories this morning. In a moment, I'm going to bring you a bit more on the UK Investment Summit. This ahead of Bloomberg's interview with the Prime Minister Keir Starmer later today. But first, did you watch the SpaceX launch? The incredible pictures of SpaceX, this fifth test of the unmanned Starship rocket. You've got to have a look at them. They caught the booster part of the rocket with two giant mechanical arms, something that Elon Musk has called chopsticks. As this huge booster came back to Earth, came back to the launch pad in Texas. Now, this successful test underscores, first, I guess, the immense progress that SpaceX is making when it comes to kind of their launch capabilities. That booster rocket, 71 metres high, 9 metres wide, i.e. the size of a building. They only got approval for this from the Federal Aviation Administration on Saturday, and then it was launched on Sunday. There's been actually kind of quite a lot of months of wrangling between SpaceX and the FAA in the US. They've been at loggerheads for quite some time. But having said that, it is just a huge stride on this path to create reusable rockets that can fly to the moon, then beyond to Mars. Obviously, that's the big, Musk ambition, isn't it? To ferry humans and scientific equipment and supplies there. Have a look at it online. I think it's, a really pretty incredible achievement over the weekend that took place in Texas. Now, also over the weekend on Saturday, China's highly anticipated finance ministry briefing, but it lacked the firepower that equity investors had hoped for, although Goldman Sachs has upgraded its forecast for Chinese economic growth for 2024 and 2025. Let's discuss this with Bloomberg's Asia economic correspondent Katya Dmitrieva. Katya, good morning. So the finance minister, Lan Foan, what did he say and how big is the gap between what markets had expected and what he actually delivered?
Yeah, and it's a good segue from space. We're coming back to Earth with this one for sure. The finance minister announced that there is more room to borrow and increase the deficit, promised more support for the housing sector, but all without providing a dollar figure. The government also has about $325 billion US dollars equivalent in local government special bond funds, which they said they would be used in the coming months in the fourth quarter. And there was also, as is typical with these kinds of announcements in China, hints at other potential policies, such as support for Chinese startups or unicorns. which is valued at about $1 billion. And then the National Development Reform Commission, which is essentially the country's economic planners, they pushed forward a slew of approvals for investment projects. So Goldman basically did the math. They found that it added about 0.4 percentage points to GDP this year, also some carry through into this year, rather next year. But it's important to note that they also noted structural challenges still remain. So this sort of provides a short-term boost, maybe a bit of sugar to the economy this year and next. It gets China towards the 5% goal this year, as officials promised, and they really want to hit that goal. But longer term, it doesn't fix some of those structural issues, consumption, deflation, and all stemming from this property sector downturn.
Yeah, and that is also the issue, isn't it? That China has been in deflation for more than a year. And that's a big fundamental problem.
Absolutely. And officials received a reminder of that hazard on Monday. We had data that showed producer prices went further into the red, further declined. And deflation really impacts a wide array of the economy, like just across the economy. You have companies that end up making less money, less profit. You have consumption that remains really weak, and wages don't go up. And in fact, we've had a lot of layoffs and postponing of bonuses. And so it hits everyone in their pocketbook very directly. And it's something that why investors and why economists were really looking for a lot more from this package, frankly, and a lot more for consumption. Ahead of this weekend announcement, Bloomberg News did a survey of analysts, and they expected more than $280 billion targeted to consumers, so vouchers or support for low-income Chinese households, and we just didn't see that.
OK, Katya, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Bloomberg's Asia economic correspondent Katya Dmitrieva then on the Finance Ministry briefing, which did look to be, again, a bit disappointing on Saturday. We'll continue to track that story for you. Now, here in the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Chancellor Rachel Reeves hope to be able to announce billions of pounds of major investment deals in AI, life sciences and infrastructure at their first international investment summit. This is the first big test for Starmer's plans to galvanise growth in Britain, and it comes, 2.5 weeks ahead of the first budget by a Labour government in 15 years. Joining me now is Bloomberg's UK correspondent Lizzie Burden. Good morning. So what are they hoping to announce today? This idea of getting rid of regulation that needlessly holds back investment, Lizzie.
Exactly. So, of course, growing the economy by 2.5% is Keir Starmer's top priority. His government says investment is key to that, hence the spotlight on this summit today. We're expecting him to host all these global bosses, the elites of finance and tech, and he's going to say he'll rip out the bureaucracy that blocks investment, which is a reference to him asking the Competition Authority to soften its approach. We're also expecting him to say he'll do everything in his power to galvanise growth. So what does that look like? Well, we're expecting him to unveil commitments from the private sector to invest more than £50 billion into the UK economy. But Caroline, I have to say that is expected to include £24 billion of green investment that was already announced last week. On top of that, we're expecting him to set a direction for the CMA in the Industrial Strategy Green Paper that comes out as well today. But look, the big picture is undermining this sales pitch is the ongoing uncertainty about his administration's industrial strategy. You've got government plans to spell out the favoured sectors at today's gathering, but it's not going to unveil the full plan until the spring. And what companies really want is long-term clarity. You've also had this, it has to be said, and I know you reported about this last week, a rocky start to the government, of rocky 100 days. He's had to let go of his chief of staff, Sue Gray, already because of the infighting at Number 10. And he's had to give back £6,000 in donations because of this slew of stories about government officials taking donations for access. On top of which, he's only just managed to secure an investment minister in the form of the ex-Darktrace CEO Poppy Gustafsson. But this is really at the 11th hour because the first choice candidate pulled out. So today he's going to try and hit that reset button and show that global finance really is behind this Labour government.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.